These are the ways that demons are affecting your dreams, sabotaging your mental health, and what you can do about it. Today, we're reacting to an interview with Patrick McNamara, who's the professor of psychology at North Central University, and this is what he says that dreams about demons really mean, and we'll see what we think about that. Do nightmares serve any purpose? I say yes. Let's see what he says.
So I've been arguing that REM sleep is crucial for religious consciousness and for human creative capacities and for human cultural evolution. But when it goes off the rails, is associated with a lot of very serious disorders as well. Everything from depression to isolated sleep paralysis and nightmares.
This can actually go both ways. I totally agree, by the way. Without sleep, your brain just totally deteriorates and stops functioning. And if we believe in the metaphysical, which you know me, I stick with the psychology and the science, but if you believe in the metaphysical, you would have to believe that it connects with the unconscious part of your brain, which is also the part of your brain that dreams. So far, in total agreement. And if you overdo that metaphysical and that spiritual part, it can lead to some very toxic mental health problems, psychoses, different sort of paranoias, things like that, because those type of things really live inside the unconscious. It's not a prefrontal cortex problem. It's an unconscious problem.
In particular. Now, a nightmare is defined by most sleep medicine specialists as simply a scary, terrifying dream that wakes you up. A lot of other...
I also love the text on screen and also the way that his voice is, because I don't think that this person really makes a YouTube channel on their own, because he talks like this the whole time and in the entire interview. And so if there wasn't interesting graphics and text on screen, man, this would be painful to watch.
Other sleep medicine specialists say, well, it doesn't need to wake you up. If you have a really terrifying dream, that's a nightmare.
I actually classify them in two different ways. A nightmare is just a bad dream, something that leaves you with a negative emotional response. A night terror is something that wakes you up. So for me, they're different levels of those nightmares. So comment which one you actually have now that you know the difference in definition down below. And while you're there, hit subscribe, of course.
And we know that nightmares tend to occur during REM sleep.
Right?
And we know that lots of kids go through a phase where they have lots of nightmares.
I get asked this a lot.
And then they sort of disappear for most people. But people who are vulnerable...
My theory, by the way, about why that happens is because the brain is developing and a child starts to learn that the world is dangerous. And in order to process the dangers in the world, you have to dream about them, right? The brain is creating new connections and trying to learn how to keep itself safe. So by dreaming about those terrible things, it's learning how to be safer, because we recognize as children that, oh, the happy imagination place that I live in for my day to day is not the way the world is. It's scary and I can get hurt. So I've got to protect myself. That's what's going on there. And that's why, like, especially like, man, 8 to 12, maybe even 5 to 12, a lot of really bad night terrors. They'll wake up and come screaming.
But people who are vulnerable to nightmares have sort of a disinhibited form of REM neurobiology.
Yes.
REM tends to erupt into their waking consciousness a little bit, and they get these dissociative states during the daytime. And unfortunately, nightmares.
Maladaptive daydreaming. Look it up.
So nightmares, for the most part, there's nothing good about them. And I just want to underline the fact that there are very good treatments. You don't have to suffer from nightmares.
I very much agree about you don't have to suffer from nightmares, but we do have some science and some research to support that nightmares are actually trying to release your unprocessed emotions, and they're trying to help you process those scary things that have gone on. We see this a lot with PTSD. You'll have PTSD nightmares as the brain's attempt to keep yourself safe and to process that traumatic experience. So they do serve a purpose. They're actually healthy for you because the brain's trying to process and restore its mental health, but sometimes it gets trapped. And so you do need to work with a therapist and use some of those things that he's referencing to help get rid of those nightmares, dream interpretation being one of them, and one that I use in my clinical practice.
But from the point of view of somebody investigating religious consciousness, nightmares are particularly important.
Yes.
Because for most people who have nightmares, supernatural agents appear. And for many of them, and particularly for people with religious backgrounds, those supernatural agents will be demonic agents. And
that's a depiction of sleep paralysis,
unfortunately, those demonic agents really have very specific, enduring effects on this person suffering from nightmares. There are many examples, but When you look at series of nightmares over time,
Whoa.
one common pattern is that before the series of nightmares begin, a demon appears just in the room. The person has a nightmare and they say, I woke up from this dream and wow, there's this weird demon in my room. But he was just there. He wasn't doing anything. It scared me and I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And then a week later, they'll have a very similar dream, but the same demon. And the demon will now be near the bed. No longer in the corner of the room, but near the bed.
If you've had this happen to you, you have to let me know. I want to hear the stories. Like, that's the funnest thing. Like, my channel is small right now and I'm growing on YouTube. So please subscribe. It's so cool because I get to interact with each of you individually. So if you've had an experience like this, I'd love to respond to your comment. Just leave it down below because there's a lot of people who do experience this. And he's right. You see very similar stories across all of these different like case studies and vignettes.
Third week, I have the nightmare again. It's a very similar nightmare. And now the demonic agent knows that the dreamer is aware of them. And so the demonic agent ups his game and tries to get closer and closer to the individual having the nightmare. And so the individual starts to put up barriers to protect themselves. In an individual who's particularly vulnerable to nightmares, these barriers will eventually not work.
Yes.
And they need to get clinical help before that happens because
So glad he
in
said
many
that.
cases, the demonic agent is out to possess the individual's consciousness. And the individual will wake up. I mean, if you look at case studies of demonic possession, they invariably occur after a series of nightmares, and then finally the demonic agent in the nightmare possesses the individual consciousness.
Now here's the thing. Here's the thing. I believe that dreams are a window into your mental health, right? So for me, that demonic possession is the overtaking of a neuroses, right? A psychosis, right? Some neurotic kind of expression. And so you'll see precursors of that neurotic expression, that psychosis in the dreams, because dreams are predictive. They're telling you what's going on inside of your psyche before you may even be aware of it in your waking life. So yes, I agree with this. I don't agree on the spiritual side. But I do agree that this stuff is important to pay attention to, and you need to get clinical treatment before this stuff becomes a full-blown sort of break from reality, a psychotic break. Yes.
And they wake up in a possessed state.
Yep.
And then you need, like exorcism rituals to
Which
get
actually can
rid of
help.
the demonic agent.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ways in which nightmares teach us about supernatural agents and religious consciousness. And why, obviously, you do not want to have nightmares. However, nightmares have been around, we're almost certain, for many thousands of years.
I'd argue
We
since the
have
beginning.
evidence that people who experience frequent nightmares, but are able to control them, and able to control the demonic agent in traditional tribal societies, gain great social status.
Yes.
Because who can be more powerful than a person who can control a demonic agent? The nightmares mark them off as special human beings, that the divine has called them in a special way. And only somebody who's strong enough to deal with those demonic agents are called to be a shaman or a
Medicine
spiritual
man,
guide.
spirit
for
guide,
others.
yeah.
So that's how people with nightmares in traditional societies were held, in special high regard, because they carried this special burden.
I think today we call this lucid dreaming. So when you can start to control a dream, it is a skill that anyone can be taught, but some people are more natural at it. And so we call those lucid dreamers. And those people who are lucid dreamers do tend to have some unique ways that their brain is built and some unique psychological properties that make them incredibly intuitive and incredibly creative. So I agree with this here, but I do agree with it from more of like a clinical standpoint.
So nightmares tell us a lot about religious consciousness and about REM neurobiology.
Oh, and I meant to say, like, the reason that like exorcisms actually work is because it's hypnotic. It's hypnosis. Like, I use hypnosis to help heal people from trauma, which in an older sense would have been seen as an exorcism, right? There's a lot of things that I do in a hypnotic setting that could be seen as similar to what a priest might do in an exorcism, right? Because we're actually doing the same thing. They're just doing it in a religious sort of context. I'm doing it in a clinical sort of context. I know the science behind it. They're doing it from a more metaphysical, spiritual standpoint, but it's nonetheless effective because they're using the same techniques, which is very interesting to pay attention to. Like, those who are in religion tend to be able to do things and understand things before science has caught up, but that doesn't mean that they don't overdo them and cause damage at times as well. So you've got to be careful about that balance.
One of the things they tell us about REM neurobiology is REM has special computational neurological machinery
Yes.
to handle trauma.
Thank you.
We think that the fear extinction circuit in REM sleep functions differently during a nightmare than during an ordinary dream.
Absolutely.
And the reason why the fear extinction circuit, the computational machinery that's used to handle emotional traumas, doesn't function well is that the fear extinction circuit breaks down at a certain gate.
Yep.
It's blocked for some reason in some individuals.
By the prefrontal
And
cortex.
because the brain uses REM sleep to handle traumas. And when the trauma can't be handled effectively, immediately, the trauma memories hang around in REM sleep.
Exactly.
And you get PTSD. So every night, the individual continually tries to integrate the trauma into long-term memory stores and then get rid of it. And that's why REM is so crucial for getting through calamities and plagues and all kinds of horrible events, because it's nature's special way to handle emotional trauma.
Oh my God, it's what I've been saying for years. And finally, somebody else said it as well. Oh my gosh. Listen, follow, like, and subscribe down below. If you want to see more of this content, send me some links of other videos you'd like me to respond to. Oh, it's just heartwarming to see that other people are recognizing the power of dreams, not only to heal your mental health and heal trauma, but to be an insight into what steps you need to make next inside of your life. If you want to make those steps as well, be here. I'll be helping you out. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.